All right, let's use the quote do the quotes lab. So quotes is all about the use effect hook, which I'll teach you how to use. So let's take a step back and remember that React decided to use this functional programming paradigm. So what that means is that we want our components to be beautiful, perfect functions with no side effects. That means that their inputs map straight to their outputs. So if you have a function and it has like, let's say it's like function sum, well, let's do some code while we're at it. So let's say you have like some function, right? Like function sum a and b, right? And then this will return a plus b. Okay, this is a pure function. Okay, oh, thank you, TypeScript. Make this a number and this a number. Neat. Okay, this is a pure function, right? That the inputs map to outputs. There are no side effects. There's no randomness. There's nothing. There is, if I put 1 and 3, then I will always get 4 every single time. All right, so you can go back and look up the meaning of pure function, but one of the things is that inputs map to outputs. Okay, so if I put the same inputs map to the same output. So we think of our components the same way, right? So you could think of you have a component like app, right? And it returns, okay, this JSX, this HTML with some other stuff mixed into it. So it's a pure function. Okay, so props would be their input. There's no props in this one, but if you have props, you're supposed to be able to say, okay, cool, if I give my component these props, this is what it's supposed to output. Okay, so that input always gets the output. The problem is that sometimes we have side effects, things that from the outside that can wreck our little balance. That's the way I like to think of it. One of the most common ones is API calls. API calls are not deterministic. You are calling someone else's API, which may or may not be like it may or may not be up. We don't know when exactly it will respond back. Maybe it's slow, maybe it's fast. We don't know, right? It's another person's system. We'd like their data, right? But we don't necessarily know whether or not we're gonna like get a response in a timely manner. That means when I run my component function, if there is an API call, I can't call it a pure function anymore because that API call is a side effect. So that was kind of a little bit of a wrench thrown into the ivory tower pure functional programming paradigm, but we have these hooks, okay, that allow us to take care of that. So we've already learned the use state hook, okay, so remember these are called hooks, all right, these are basically special functions we can use in a React component to do various things. Now we're going to use the use effect. All right, so they want us to display a bunch of stuff to the screen, all right, some quotes, okay, and they gave us some JSON. So let's take a look at that first. All right, so this is the JSON from quotes from Grand Circus. Here we go. So it's an array of JavaScript objects with two properties, text and author. So we've got the text, which is the quote, and the author, which is whoever said it. And this is an array of them. There's like multiple quotes. All right, so we need to be able to pull this JSON in, okay, to our program, then turn it into a bunch of objects, and then display them to the screen. All right, cool. So that doesn't seem too difficult. The first thing we need to do is we need to model what we see. So I'm going to make a folder called models. And then I'm going to make quote.ts. All right, this is going to be the actual interface for the quote. So export interface quote. Cool. And then if we look back at what data is there, it's text and author, both of which are strings. So we have text, which is a string, and author, which is a string. All right, cool. So there's that. All right, 1 second. Yeah, just so you can tell since it's a second to catch up with me. All right, so we've got our model. Fantastic. So now let's go ahead and make our component. Components, I'll just call this like, I don't know, like quotes. .tsx. Okay, remember the file is called quotes, so therefore the function's also going to be called quotes. They need to match because otherwise it's really confusing. Right? Export function quotes. All right, it doesn't take any properties. All right, cool. So essentially we do have a list of quotes, right? So if we did like const quotes set quotes equals use state, which is an array of quote. It starts off as a blank array. Okay, we know how to do this. Okay, this is a hook we do know. All right, so just so we got the nomenclature correct. 1 second, let me import. Okay, this is a React hook. Okay, this is the useState hook. Okay, so we already know like one React hook. Okay, useState. Okay, useState allows us to keep track of state for a particular component. So quotes or Boolean strings, like whatever you want to use. We've definitely done useState a dozen times. Okay, let's learn a new hook. It's going to be called useEffect. Okay, the useEffect hook is for everything that's a side effect. All right, like it typically for API calls, but there's other things that you could use useEffect for. API calls is like 9 times out of 10, to be honest with you. All right, so useEffect is a function like this, and we're going to pass in the function. If you like so. Now, useEffect will run when you tell it to. Here's what I mean by that. It can run when the component first mounts, when the component first comes into existence. Okay, it's called mounting. All right, so when the component first comes into existence, then we can say, okay, useEffect, run once, only then. useEffect can also run and like detect if something's changed. So we can say, okay, useEffect, if quotes changes, then run again. So useEffect basically is a way of us sort of tying in to different changes in our component. All right, which again is not something we do from a purely functional standpoint, but we're able to use this hook, all right, to keep our functional part of the component and the side effects sort of like segregated nice and clean. All right, so we're going to useEffect. I put a function in for the first argument, and then for the second argument, do a comma and do a blank array. If you do a blank array like this, what you mean is, hey, when the page first loads, not the page, but the component first loads, run the useEffect. Okay, that's what you're saying. It's blank. There's two parts. So basically the function that you want to run, and the second part is dependencies. What should useEffect look out for? Okay, you could put like a variable in here. So if I did this, okay, like every time quotes changes, is like, let's say like you add a quote or remove a quote, then useEffect will run. Whatever function you put in here will run. Okay, we don't have any dependencies. I just wanted to run once when the page loads. Okay, cool. So we've got useEffect, we've got our function. We want it to run once when the page loads. What do we actually want it to do? Okay, we're going to download a library called Axios. Okay, Axios is a library that we're going to use to call APIs. All right, so it's got a bunch of code that knows what to do in order to call an API. You don't have to worry about the details. All right, we're going to do npm install Axios. You can use fetch, but with TypeScript, it's kind of awkward. All right, so we're going to use Axios. All right, so now we're going to import Axios from Axios. All right, and then it's pretty simple. We're going to do axios.get. All right, and what are we getting? We're getting an array of posts, not posts, quotes, Jonathan. So we're getting an array of quotes. Okay, so here we have Axios, all right, which is from the library, and then we're going to do get, and then what type it is. And the thing you have to remember here is that you're getting like data, and then you want it to be turned into these objects, right? So I want an array of quotes. And then you got to tell it, okay, what URL do you want it to go to in order to get this data? And I believe the URL is this. So they gave it to us in the lab. Okay, I'm just going to paste it here, all right? So what is this line here doing, right? It's basically saying, okay, cool. Hey, Axios, what do you want? I want you to do a get. Okay, those HTTP verbs, right? So it's got like a get. Cool, I'll go do a get. Like, what shape is the data? Like, what do you want me to turn the data into? I want you to take the data and turn it into an array of quote. All right, cool. Where do you want me to go? I want you to go here, okay, this URL. Go to this URL, grab the JSON, turn it into an array of quotes. All right, so we'll get this array of quotes. In fact, I'll make it, so what we'll do is we'll do let API quotes equals this. Cool. Notice if you hover over this, it will give you a promise of Axios quote. All right, so you'll be able to see what you'll get. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, Jonathan, I want an array of quotes, not a promise of an array of quotes. If we go back way back when we were doing promises, promises were a nice way of doing like asynchronous functions. So like calling an API, I don't know when I'll get a response back, right? Like it could be a second, could be 5 milliseconds, it could be like whatever. I don't know. Okay, the timing is not clear. So I'm basically saying, okay, cool, go do this API call and promise you'll get back to me. Okay, that's basically the idea of a promise. So what we got to do now is I've got this part up here. So what I'm going to do after it is I'm going to get rid of that semicolon and then do then. Okay, remember then is say, okay, cool. Go to the API, do your get. When you're done, then do this. I want the response. Okay, and then response.json, I believe. Oh, they don't like that. Oh, that's right. It is data. Alrighty, cool. So data is just a property, okay, of the Axios response. The Axios library will return a promise, and then it will make sure it has a property called data. That's because of the library that we're using. Now if you hover over this, you'll notice it's just promise of quote. Okay, so this will get us back our data. All right, and now we can take this data and then we can put it into the state. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, let's make this even simpler. I could just make this all one line. So let's get rid of this. Let's just do axios.get, and then here we can just basically say set quotes response.data. So basically whatever data I get back from this API call, just go ahead and slam it into the quotes. Okay, cool. So this is it basically. All you gotta do for an API call is we're gonna use the Axios library, and Axios you just use like this, and then you got like get, post, put. We'll learn more about how to do all the HTTP verbs in code, but for right now we're just getting data. So again, Axios library, go do a get, and I want an array of quotes back. And then where do I go? Cool, go hit this URL and give me my data. Awesome. After you're done, then take the response you get back and then set the quotes, the state of this quotes component to whatever you get back. All right, cool. So this will run once. This whole code will run once when the page loads. All right, now let's go ahead and actually return something. So we'll do return div class name equals quotes. Okay, we'll actually do our JSX, and then let's go ahead and I think they want an unordered list. Cool, so UL, and then we'll just map all the quotes here. So curly brackets because we're doing JavaScript, quotes dot map quote arrow, and then we'll just do like li. Let's see, should it be on one line? I guess it'll be on one line. What is does it say what kind of like? Okay, it's probably like author colon quote. We can do it like that. So quote dot author colon quote dot text. All right, that should be good enough. All right, so we've got everything. I've mapped my quotes that I get back from my API. So one once. And all I gotta do is go back to app.tsx, get rid of the boilerplate nonsense, and then put my quotes component here. Okay, and import it, and then we can check to see if this works. Cool, everything's saved, npm start. Take a second for it to run. And voila, here you have it. Now we have a list of quotes. You can see that there's just basically a bunch of people. Thomas Edison, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Carl Sandburg, whoever. All right, so you got quotes. So remember, each one of these is from the JSON. So again, let me kind of bring the JSON over so you can visualize this. So this was the JSON. Okay, each was an object that had two properties, text and author. All right. I grabbed those. Now you can see I can slap all that data to the screen. All right. Now obviously it doesn't look that great. You can use some CSS to make this look a little bit prettier, but you get the idea. So if we go back to code, all right, let's go back to our quotes component. Okay, and let's try to review how this works. All right, so I created a state on line 8 to hold the quotes because eventually we're gonna have quotes in here. All right, but we can't use state or we can't just call the function because calling an API is a side effect. It ruins our like pure function. So that's fine. We're gonna use a React hook called useEffect, which is specifically for side effects. Okay, so remember side effects are like 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 again pure function is same input always gives you the same output. Okay, some side effects basically like wreck that. Like an API call is not gonna. There's no way I can guarantee that the API call will react exactly the same way every single time. This does not happen. So since it's a side effect, what we're going to do is we are going to use the useEffect hook. It has two parts. The first part is a function. The second part are dependencies. If there are no dependencies, it will just the useEffect function will run when the page first loads. So that's why I have that blank array on line 15. Okay, so the function that is being passed in to useEffect, okay, is it's the thing that's going to run when the page first loads. So we use the Axios library, which we had to install. Okay, you need to install, it does not come out of the box. Okay, you could use fetch for this, but Axios is more convenient to use with TypeScript. Okay, so we did axios.get, okay, the HTTP verb get, and then what kind of data am I getting back? I'm getting an array of quote. Cool. What URL should I go to in order to get my data? Provide them the URL. Okay, it's a promise, so go do the API call, okay, and then when you're done, give me back the response. And notice how I take the response and the data from the response, that dot data you see on line 14, that comes from the Axios library. It's nothing, that's just what Axios decided to do. And then we use the function set quotes, which is part of our state, to take the data from that JSON data we saw earlier into our array of quote. Now, how it gets from JSON over to TypeScript, you don't have to worry about that. Deserialization and deserialization are not processes you have to worry about. It will do it for you. And notice on line 20, I'm just taking all the quotes and listing them out inside of an unordered list. All right, so this is useEffect. useEffect is, again, one of like top 10 most useful things. React kind of doesn't like, React is a great front-end framework, but you do need data to like show to the screen, right? So useEffect is commonly used for API calls. It is used for other things, but for a lot of things, it's mostly used for API calls. So just practice this. Try to use Axios to get all this stuff to the screen and follow this pattern, and you should be good.